I'm going to talk about, I'm from the Department of Education Early Childhood Studies, and I also work in initial teacher education with early childhood specialism in primary education. And I'm going to talk about one of the techniques that I use, which is pedagogic documentation. This is where teacher trainees create documents and reflect on documents related to their pedagogy, and it is the assessment for the module. This is the first time I've taught this isn't the first time I've taught using this approach, but this module was developed around that approach, so I'm going to be talking about that. So a little bit about what I'm calling documentation. It is the use of documents, creating the documents, and reflecting upon the documents, which may be photographs, narrative writing, work samples in some cases, and to use those documents to reflect on pedagogy. There's a strong tradition in early childhood education with this approach. It is known to make learning visible. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today were some thoughts I had about it, and hopefully get some dialogue around it. There are two issues. You're producing the documents, the students are producing the documents, but they're also using the documents. So they may be using photographs in the classroom, photographs of the learning environment, or photographs of themselves teaching. So then they would be using the camera as a way of seeing themselves or seeing the learning environment, but they're also then using those photographs as documents and using them in a way that they would analyze them with a sort of textual analysis. Also, they are creating writing around these documents, and then the writing is a document, but it's meant to be narrative writing, and that's sometimes troubling when I say to them, tell the story of your pedagogy. It's something that is maybe unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And then they're meant to link that story to theory and research. And then one of the other techniques I use is I encourage them to use a metaphor to sort of extract deeper thinking about their narrative and the story of their pedagogy. So when I'm thinking about using the narrative documents that go along with the photographs, when I was reflecting on this over the last few days, I was thinking about it as being an editorial space. A space where they are the author, protagonist, editor of this information. And then, so what does that mean for me as a teacher? So I'm hoping you can help me with that. Right. So this use of documentation then, the photographs and the narrative writing, is meant to be public. But there are lots of issues around that I will talk about as well. So we would be using the photographs, but we have to collectively analyze them in order to make learning visible. And those last two are photographs of a technique I used in the class, demonstrating the use of a camera in the class, documenting. Does anybody recognize what that is? It is a Froebel gift. Okay, so it's the one before that. And so then what we do in the class is we use the camera to document the students' engagement with the Froebel gift, and then talk about what the meaning of the Froebel gift is, and that sort of sets them off. Okay. The thing about your pedagogic documentation, it is meant to be guided by some kind of epistemological focus. It probably is suitable to go out and just take photographs of things, but you need to have a question that guides your photographs in order for you to be able to collectively analyze it. So we think about these kinds of questions. What do I know and why do I know it? What is important for the children that I'm working with? What do they know? What do they want to know? What do they need to know? Why do I do the things that I do? How does my pedagogy, the way that I do things, my beliefs and values and the way that I do things affect their learning experiences? And ultimately, where do I go from here? So hopefully you can see how a photograph and a document of your teaching might help provoke these kinds of questions amongst a group of learners, teacher trainees. Okay, so I wanted to talk about using the camera because I said there were two things. You are creating the documents, but you're in the process of creating the document by using the camera. And this is very much a process here of putting lots of different things together. Using the photograph as a way of seeing. What do you photograph? It is an editorial photography. You are editorializing, also editing. Is it the truth? we say, the advice I give students is it's provisional truth. It's there to elicit your memory of what is happening in a moment when you're teaching. But there are lots of ethical issues. Permission, of course, when you're working, whenever you take photographs of people and it's not in a public place, you have to consider the ethics behind that. Schools are not a public place, and young children, we have to think about their assent, but also their guardians' consent, and that leads to a lot of issues. Also, who has the camera generally has the power over this kind of provisional truth that we're talking about. All right, the other component of the document, there's the photograph, and then there's the narrative writing around the photograph. Telling the story of your pedagogy. It's based on this belief that teaching is a story profession. We do have stories about our teaching, and it is important for teacher trainees to recognize and value the stories of their teaching. They also, though, have to make connections to theory and research. And another bit of this, and this is some work that I do in other areas as well, is using a metaphor then as the tutor, encouraging them to use a metaphor about their teaching so that they can dig deeper. Okay. Dialogue is part of this. And just what I wanted to talk about this was, creating the space within the lecture sessions, within sort of workshop type of sessions, for students to be able to talk about the photographs and talk about their narrative. So that has to be created. These are all the issues around it. Okay, and it's a pedagogic biography, thinking of it that way. The teacher is the protagonist. He or she is writing about themselves. They are the author, but they are also the editor. And they have to consider, when they select their photographs, and reconsider. Am I out of time? Yeah, okay. All right, so I think I've talked about the ethics, I've talked about the tensions, talked about the different things around it, so I'd like to take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you very much.